Okay, we're looking at 4-2, looking at the sum and differences of cubes. So when we look at cubed functions, there is a formula like the quadratic formula that's about 5 times as long. And so we don't go through that because there's no reason at this level to work through an equation that's that long. But when you have cubed function where there are a few different tricks, like the sum and differences of cubes, or you've got this x cubed minus 8. It's an easy formula that we can look at and figure out pretty quickly what this is factored apart. So what we will use to remember at least where the signs go is the acronym SOAP. And that stands for the first sign is going to be the same as whatever the original function is. So same. The next sign will be the opposite. And the last sign, as you'll see here, is always positive. So that acronym, SOAP, is to help you remember when you've got a cubed function, what the signs are, depending on whether this is addition or subtraction. So with this one on number 1, it is subtraction. But what we first have to figure out is what is the cubed root of x to the third power and 8, because it says a cubed minus b cubed equals just a minus b. So I have to figure out what a is. And so you can think about that as splitting this up into groups of 3. And if I get a group of 3, that's what that'll equal. So x to the third power is a group of 3 x's. So a is going to equal x, and 8 will be split up into 2 times 2 times 2. So b value is going to be 2. And so once I know that, then I can just fill in a minus b. Okay, so x minus 2. Then a squared plus ab. So a squared means I'll have to do x squared plus ab, which would be x times 2. So 2x plus b squared. So plus 2 squared, which would be 4. And that is our answer. Okay, so we want to check this just to make sure and just to kind of prove to ourselves that this formula actually works. So we're going to multiply this back together and make sure it works out like it's supposed to. So when I do that, I'll write the trinomial up top, x squared, positive 2x, positive 4, and on the side, x and a negative 2. And we're just going to go through and multiply everything out. So x to the third power to x squared and 4x. Negative 2 times x squared would be negative 2x squared. Negative 4x and negative 8. So when you look at the diagonals here, those are the same. They have the same variable at the back with the same power, but they have opposite signs, so they're going to cancel out, leaving me with just x to the third power minus 8. So that works out in reverse, and we get the same thing going back and forth. So let's look at the next one. I have 54x to the third power plus 128y cubed. Now, looking at this, I don't know that I can split up 54 into anything just as it is into groups of 3. So let's look back here at our factoring flowchart. So first thing we're going to do always is look for a greatest common factor. So I'm thinking on that one, I'll have a greatest common factor, and then it's got two terms. So we are going to be doing the sum and difference of cubes still. Then we'll have a few factor using the process or mentally, and the factor by grouping. Those were ones that we did on the last lesson in 4.1. And then at the end, we just double check, make sure nothing else can be factored. So on this, we're going to make sure, I've got a common factor there that I could pull out from both of those. And as we look at it, the only thing I think both of them will divide by is going to be 2. So if I divide them by 2, half of 54 would be 27. And that 2, remember, is not going to go away, so I'm going to put it out front. I have 27 x to the third power plus half of 128 is 64 y to the third power. And so when you're thinking about splitting it up, 27 is 9 times 3, and 9 splits up into 3 times 3. 64 would be, normally we think of 8 times 8. Remember, 8 splits up into 3 2s. And so what I get is 2 groups of 2, which would combine to give me 4. So when we're figuring out my A and B value, A is going to be 3x, and B is going to be 4y. So now we can start filling in our sum of cubes. So first is A plus B, the same sign. And I'll squeeze my 2 up in front there. So A plus B, so 3x plus 4y. Then opposite sign, so A squared. When I square this, remember I'll do 3 squared and x squared. So 9x squared, opposite sign, so minus A times B. So I'll do 3 times 4 is 12. And x times y is just xy. And then the AP, always positive. And that would be b squared. So 4 squared and y squared. Give me 16y squared. And we won't go back and multiply this all out to make sure it cancels out. We're following a formula. As long as we're pretty sure we've gotten A and B correct, this should work out. Okay, next we have 8 to the 6th power. And so when we split up 8, of course, we get the 3 groups of the 3 2s, so it's a group of 2s. When I do x to the 6th, remember that 6 x's, so there'd be 1 group and 2 groups. So I'm not going to have just A equaling 2x. It's going to equal to x times x, or 2x squared. And then 125 is 5 times 5 times 5. So B is just going to be 5. So I can go right away and start doing my difference of cubes. So the first sign will be the same, and it's A minus B. Then I have A squared. So when I square 2, that's 4. And when I do x squared, it's x squared times x squared. So that's going to be x to the 4th. So I'm just multiplying that by 2. And it's kind of just dividing that 6 by 3 to get the square there. then a times b. Oh, and that's sign SO, so opposite. I'm doing 2 times 5 to get 10. And the x squared will just hang out on the end. And then always positive at the end. And that would be b squared. So 5 squared gives me 25. And just like that, we're done for that one. Look at number 4. Remembering we're looking for a greatest common factor first. And so pretty quickly we see, oh, those will both divide by 5. So 5 hops out front. And I have 3 x to the third power plus 1. Now we got the 1 that we could take the cubed root of, and it'd just be 1. But 3, there's not a whole number that would work for that. So my cubes, if I do 1 to the third power, it's 1. 2 to the third power is 8. So there's nothing anywhere remotely close to 3. So for this one, that is my answer. That's all I can do to simplify it, and we are done with that one. Okay, on the back, we get to a little bit of a decision time. Now I've got x to the fourth and 81, which neither one of those split up into groups of 3, and there's not a greatest common factor, so not going to be sum of cubes. It's going to be, or difference of cubes, it's going to be difference of squares. And so I can split it up in the same way and say that a is x squared, because I divide that by 2 now, and b be the square root of 81, which is 9. But normally we just end up writing that as square root of the first term, so x squared plus 9 times x squared minus 9. Now what they do to you here, though, is that, okay, this one's done, it's factored as much as it can, but this one here is actually difference of squares again. So we have to split it up, and my new a would just be x, my new b would be 3. So this splits up into x plus 3 and x minus 3. And so I get x squared plus 9 times x plus 3, x minus 3. Okay, and now it is factored out as much as it can be. You're probably asking yourself, why do we have to pull that apart that much all the way? And the reason for that is, what you're going to see in the next lesson, you run into a lot of instances where things get divided by something. So if I had x to the fourth minus 81 divided by x plus 3, then it's not until I get it totally factored out that I find an x plus 3 that would cancel out there. So let's look at a couple more of these. On number 6, I have the greatest common factor of 3. And so when that pulls out to the front, I'm left with x to the fourth minus y to the fourth, which is really the same as number 5 now. This would have just been 3 to the fourth power for 81. And so I'm doing difference of squares, which would look like 3 times x squared plus y squared, and then x squared minus y squared. And we're just going to go through that again. Do x plus y and x minus y. And bring down what I have here. Squared, not cubed. And that would be my final answer there. On number 17, again, when we look at a greatest common factor, there's a 16, and they both have at least an x squared. So if I pull out a 16x squared from that, you're going to end up with x squared, because x to the fourth divided by x squared leaves me with two x's up top. And 32 divided by 16 would be just 2. And this is not difference of squares, because I can't do the square root of 2. And so this is done here. Final one, we'd have difference of squares, and it would just be a single time. So x squared plus 7, x squared minus 7, and we're done there. Just a simple two-step, and we're done on that. So this is going to pretty much close out you being able to factor everything in every way possible so that we can start multiplying and dividing, and that's where it gets fun, with the canceling everything out and simplifying things down to an easier, more workable solution.